So I'm going to start the count. All right, welcome. Welcome everyone. We are just getting set up here. It's all live, so every time we do this, it's all different. And there's always a new technical problem. But let's see how it works. Hey, welcome Deborah. So I see my students coming on in Zoom, and I'll be sharing our screen soon. But I just wanted to welcome you all out there in YouTube land. If you're watching this, this is a live Q&A session for all students of the Tom Salta Masterclass series. So we're going to have some students that are new and some students that are older. And they're going to be firing off real-time questions to me, and I'll be able to see them, and you'll be able to see them. But all of you out there in YouTube land, feel free also to put some questions in there. I will get to them if I can. I have to prioritize certainly the students in the class that are with me on Zoom. But if you have some questions, please put your comments and questions down there. And hello to India as well. Great to see all you here. All right, we are worldwide. All right, everyone. So I'm gonna switch into the Zoom thing. Look at this technology. Oh my goodness. Wow. All right, this is fun. Hey everyone, how are you? Hey there on Zoom.
Hello.
Hey, what's
Hey,
up?
hey.
Doing great.
Great to see you all. We're happy to see your face if you're not too shy, and if your camera's working. But if not, I get it, no problem. So we're gonna start asking.
Tom.
Oh, there we go. There we got everybody. We got. Hey Benjamin, how are you? We have Greg. We have Dom, Mark, Tyler, Mike, Deborah, Thomas, Joe. Let's see. Oh, and many more. More coming in. Adrian, James. This is awesome. Great. Manuel. An oldie but a goodie.
Hi there.
How are you, man? Good to see you.
All good. You
It's
too,
really cool.
as always.
All right. All right, we're getting in there. Cool. All right. We have some people jumping in and out, maybe technical problems. All right, so once again, what I'm going to ask all of you here on Zoom is when you have a question, just go to the bottom of the screen where it says reactions. And if you click that, a little box shows up, and at the bottom it says raise hand. So what's cool about that is it'll help me organize, and it's like a virtual line. So it should put people in order, like I had my hand up. So because we don't have an actual physical line here, so I don't want to keep skipping somebody that I didn't realize had their hand up. And I don't want you to have to physically keep holding your hand up for 2 minutes. So anyway, so if you have some questions, now's your time to hit the buzzer, raise your hand, and then I'll start fielding some questions from the group. I hope you all enjoyed the Game Music Essentials, and there's more to come on that series. Oh, we have another person jumping in. Here we go. All right, cool. All right, so we have a question here from Mark. Mark, you're up first. All right. So unmute. Oh, I don't hear you yet. See if you have a. Doesn't look like your mic is muted. It might be just a input. So here's another. If you hook the lower left up arrow by your microphone, you choose the input, and that'll do it. I'll give you a few more seconds, and then if not, I'll go to the next person, and we'll come right back to you. Okay? Yeah, can't hear you yet, but I see you talking. All right, we'll go to the next person. Tyler, how are you, man? Unmute. There you go.
I am doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
So, I guess my question's more or less like on a business side of things, in terms of like trying to find like that first gig or something to get your foot in the door.
Yep.
Like, how would you go about doing that in terms of like, would you try pitching? I know, at least in
This
my
meeting is being recorded.
circumstance, I'm not in like a hub like Los Angeles or
Right.
New York or wherever like that.
Right.
So I guess when it comes to networking and finding someone that's doing like an indie project on a film or a game or whatever, what would be your advice to kind of securing like that first gig?
Yeah, right. It's always the hard thing. It's always like that catch 22. right? Because it's like, okay, well, it's about networking and stuff and meeting people, but they don't just fall out of the sky. Where do you start, right?
Mhm.
So, and again, if I have said this once, I've said it 1,000 times, and so please forgive me. I think I think a lot of us here know exactly what I'm about to say. Is it's all about relationships,
Mhm.
right? So it's just kind of like making new friends when you go to a new school or a new place. It's you start with that one person, and then maybe they know somebody, and then you have two people, and then you have four people, and then it goes. That's really how organic it really gets in any industry, I think. It becomes like, so in the game business, it's more like, okay, well, how do I meet people? One, you met me, right? We just started there. Two,
Right.
you just met all these people here in our group. Um, we have a community, for example, even in the Tom Salta Masterclass, there's a community bulletin board that we have, so we can kind of communicate and say, hey, I'm Tyler, and this is what I do, and if anyone's looking for this, or if I can help anybody do this. A good way to meet people is to let them know, tell people what you can do for them. So whenever you meet somebody, it's really about deciding what you can do to help them. So if you happen to be, how could you help other composers, right, Tyler? It's
Right.
kind of like, tell me something that you do besides composing that's good for other composers as well.
I'm a professional guitar player. I've been playing guitar now for about 20 years.
Excellent. Great. So that's a perfect example as well, you know, for because I'm not a guitar player, right? So I work with guitarists all the time. And depending on, let's say, your style, that might be one way that we could start working together. Or you could look to be an assistant for someone. Or if you want to meet game people, what have you, um, a lot of times if you go to things like Game SoundCon or GSC, Game SoundCon or GDC, I'm sorry, I meant to say, these are places where the professionals that do what you want to do are doing all
Mhm.
kind of gather. Now, of course, we've been through COVID, so it's been a nightmare with that. But you can still there's still a lot of virtual events. Game SoundCon will be virtual again this year, but they're gonna have these virtual meeting rooms, which are really cool. It's sort of like the real thing where you can kind of go into these 3D environments and you walk around and you see people standing and talking, and you kind of say, hey, how are you, and you just kind of get to know people, and you'll see that you're going to meet some people that you hit it off with, some people you might not hit it off with. That's fine, that's completely cool. But it's really about building relationships. Let's say if you and I were working together, or you knew another composer, assisting that composer, he might or she might refer you to a friend of theirs and say, oh, you know what, Tyler's really fun to work with, and whatever he's helped me, maybe he can help you. And it just becomes this kind of thing, and it slowly grows and grows. So that's one way how the networking builds. But it's not like, go here, push this button, and obviously,
Right.
boom, you get hired. It's not like that. It is
Right.
an
Right.
organic process, and there's countless ways of how to do it. We can talk about that all day.
Mhm.
But anyway, hopefully that answered your immediate question.
No, that's fantastic. I appreciate that. Thank you very
Okay,
much.
great, cool. All right, so then with your hands, everybody, once you do I think you press hand again, and then the hand goes down, and then you go back into the queue. Okay, cool. Mark, did you get that figured out yet?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Cool.
Awesome. Yeah, sorry about that. Thanks.
Sure.
Yeah, I was thinking about this the other day. What milestones for music delivery do you typically see over the course of the development of a video game?
Okay,
So,
so what milestones for delivery do I typically see over the course of a video
right,
game, right?
right.
Okay. Um, okay, well, the first milestone is that you get started. You sign the paperwork. It depends on the length of the project. Okay, if it's a big long project with a lot of music, there might be more milestones along the way, and you might see a milestone like, okay, we're gonna do a first vertical slice, of the entire music engine. Like if you're doing a game that requires everything from exploration music to tension music to combat music, you might have to deliver a vertical slice. I mean, I always suggest that if it wasn't already suggested. Like, let's test out our whole system and make sure it works. So I want to kind of give you the full construction kit of music and test it out and make sure it works, because that might affect future deliveries. So that might be a first delivery. And then we might say, okay, I need, the next one might be I need 30 minutes of, we need 3 more combats and 3 more suspenses and explorations. It's kind of like you have to look at the whole thing and then methodically kind of go through it. And that's pretty much it. Sometimes that burden might fall on you being the composer. Don't ever assume that the client knows the best path always to the finish line. Sometimes they do. Sometimes, I find the more experienced, the bigger companies, they're like, we've done this a million times. We know what we need. We know when we need it. We're going to give you every date. We're going to give you every cue, everything. You need to deliver this, this, and this, and this. But I've also been in situations where you have smaller teams, maybe not a dedicated audio director, but someone who kind of just handles everything, from sound, from the sound design to the voiceovers to the music, and they're like, look, just make it happen. I need a finished product by this date. And then you kind of have to figure out a good pacing to get there. So those are things to be aware of.
Right. I was just curious if nailing down the aesthetic is considered like one of the first milestones, or like they give you that freedom to kind of work your way through that if they've worked with you before, or are they really looking to nail down the sound early on?
Yeah. I think the sound is a given. Like, that has to be the first thing that you do. Now,
right.
Again, depending on the experience or the stage that you're invited in to the team, sometimes the sound is exactly known and established. Like, it has to be this. Our sound for our franchise is this and this and this. Here are examples, and that's it. And other times, it has to be developed. So there really isn't any cookie cutter way that this always works.
Gotcha.
But it
No,
is
thanks,
good.
perfect.
It is good as an experienced composer in games. It's really good to be able to help and understand and learn from your experiences on how, okay, sometimes they're really relying on you to help the process go, pain free.
Right.
You might need to step in there and make suggestions on everything from aesthetics to timelines to testing to everything. And sometimes, they know exactly what they want. They're, AAA developers doing multi-million-dollar big games, and it's like, no, you're expected to kind of step in and do it. And we know what we need, and that's that. All right?
Awesome. Perfect. Thanks,
question?
Tom.
Cool. Excellent. All right. And then remember, you can always put your hands down, and then you'll drop you out of the line. So according to this, we have Joe. I think, Joe, are you up next?
I think so. Can you hear me?
I can, perfectly.
Oh, great. Thanks again. Good to see you.
Great to see you.
My question is on a production side of things.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, what are some things that you consider when treating spatialization/panning on a music level? And how much does that depend on the number of emitters you might have in a specific level?
Okay. So you're asking what considerations have to be made when it comes to
Panning.
And we're talking about music, or are we talking about
Music only.
music only? Panning. Okay. Well, what's important is that when you are making music for a game or a film or anything else that is going to be accompanying picture and sound, you need to know what else your music is going to be heard with, right? So, if I'm, let's say, doing a first-person shooter or a third-person shooter or whatever shooter with lots of grenades and explosions and steps and whatever, usually a lot of that information is coming through the center channel, right? So you might have a lot of these explosions and things, but there might be some ambient stuff too. There might be some informative sounds that are coming from one channel or the other, or some blend of the two, right? You know, like if I'm playing Assassin's Creed or Skyrim and someone's talking, you know, with those games, I'm like, wait, who's talking? And I'm panning around the 5-1. I'm like turning around to see, try to get the voice in front of me, you know. Oh, there you are. So what you want to kind of do with that kind of thing is you want to make sure that your music doesn't confuse the issue. That's why I find that you know, musically, you don't want to put like a little sudden random, let's say if I'm doing I don't know, like a horror game or something like that, and it's really quiet and suspenseful, I don't want to all of a sudden put a little ticking sound on the left channel, because that'll be like, that might confuse the player. Like, what is that? Is that a clock, or is that like, and it's the music. So you don't want the music, unless the client wants you to do it, which rarely happens. Don't play around with don't get in the way of the sound effects and the dialogue. Another very useful trick, which I would highly recommend, especially if you're doing one of these more modern sounding, big epic kind of games, you know, a lot of times we have low percussion and, you know, stuff that's like on the kick drums and things like that. One little trick is sometimes you want to kind of play with the spacing, the space of where it is. Most of the time that stuff is right in the middle. But there's a large spectrum of gray between right in the middle and all the way on the sides. You know, and sometimes you kind of want to put it back into the mix. And that doesn't mean just lowering the volume. Sometimes putting it back in the mix is using a convolution reverb and having it sound like it's playing a little bit further away in 3D. So that can be useful too, because a lot of times the sounds you need to know in a game, guns, explosions, talking, are in your face and dry. But if you have like this, and it sounds like it's on a sound stage in the background, that could work. Does that make sense?
That makes 200% of
oh
sense.
Man, 200% sense. Woo! That's a rarity for me. So that's wonderful. Thank you, Joe. Cool. All right. Next person up we have is Adrian. Hi, Adrian. How are you, man?
Hi, Tom. Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly.
Perfect. So I have a question about your Killer Instinct work.
Yes.
I've been listening to that soundtrack in the last days, and I just noticed that the drums, I mean, the drum kit, the metal drums are super cool. I wanted to ask you, like, how did you guys did the process? Like, is it like drum programmed and then someone recorded live, or you just send the tracks to a drummer and he recorded, or if it's just drum programmed with really cool samples? How was the process in drums?
Yeah, so thank you for that. So Clayton and I, Clayton aka Cell Dweller, and myself aka Atlas Plug in the case of Killer Instinct, all of the drums were virtual. They were fake drums. Well, I hate to say fake because they're actually real drums, but they're sampled and, you know, they're programmed, I guess you'd say.
Mm-hmm.
However, I don't actually like to say programmed, because programmed implies that you're doing it all with a mouse and you're just typing in the drums. Now, some people do that amazingly well. One of them is in this group here, like Chris. I know, incredible, crazy programming drums. I'm like, what? I like to perform my drums. I'm a finger drummer. I'm like, you know, and it's easier for me because it's like I can, you know, I can do exactly what I want. I can customize it, you know. But sometimes, depending on your experience with how a drummer plays in certain genres of music, like in Killer Instinct, it was very important that it's legit heavy rock drumming, right? So sometimes some of those things came from, some of those ideas might have come from, let's say, MIDI loops that were done, that are performed by live musicians on pads, right? And sometimes it was a live playing. Like, I never programmed any of the drums in. I always played them in, and then I might, you know, tweak a little bit. But it was all virtual drums, meant to sound as realistic as possible, meant to sound as human as possible. And what's cool is when you find that balance between making something human sounding but tight, right? It's still like, it's like a machine, but I mean, there's some drummers out there that sound like machines, right? But good, like in a good way. You know what I mean? So that's pretty much where it came from. It came from authentic performing and programming of virtual heavy rock drums, and then knowing how to mix them too.
Is it possible to know which software you use for drums? I mean, the virtual drum?
Secret. No, I mean, I usually pause because, first of all, sometimes I'm wrong, because you might not believe me, but my memory is really bad with this kind of stuff. I literally, that's why I go to my sessions, I load them up. It's probably a combination. There might have been some contact things. I think Superior Drummer had a role in it. And then there was a lot of other epic percussion that ended up being enhancing it as well. So let's see. Yeah, I'm not sure if I used Addicted Drums on that as well, but, and then I have some new kits that I got in Contact, some things I never heard of. I'm like, ooh, this is kind of cool. So yeah, and I'm not sure if it's across the board either. I mean, you'd have to listen. You know, sometimes if it's meant, like, you know, if I'm starting with a, like, okay, we just want the rock drummer guy. That's it. We just want the standard. This guy plays rock drums. Superior Drummer's always done a good job with that.
Wow, that's great.
But sometimes it takes some experience to really dial in the sound right, because it's so deep. You can get amazing results from it, or not so much if you just maybe rely on some of the things that are obvious to use, like right there in your face. But, you know, whatever. So it's a combination of the sounds and the performances themselves, and the mixing, which really makes it sound like it, makes it pop.
That's good. Yeah, because when I was listening to the tracks, like the drums sounded like kind of like it was live, you know, like someone recorded it, because it's so live, a lot of feels and the kick going like, you know, like a real metal song, you know. So
right.
Wow, that's good to know that it's all virtual, and you know,
that's
we can do it from here, right?
Yeah, that's the idea. I mean, both Clay and I have experience being in the rock industry, you know, coming from rock bands and stuff like that. Believe it or not, even though I never had long hair, you know, a decade of my life was working on rock stuff too. So I have an ear for what that should sound like, and certainly Clayton is a master as well at it too. So cool, good question.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
All right, Manuel, I think it's you now.
Okay, can I cheat a bit and make 2 questions?
Oh, okay, sure. Go ahead.
Okay, one is piggybacking on.
But one at a time, because you know my memory might not.
No, of course.
Yeah, one at a time.
Well, piggybacking on Evian's question, you mentioned you use several drum kits for Killer Instinct. Did you layer some of those, or you used them for different parts of the soundtrack?
The drums themselves, you're asking?
Yes.
Well, you know, percussion in general was layered a lot. But when it comes to, let's say, a rock drum kit, unless it's sample accurate, you don't want to layer those too much. I mean, you might want to trigger another snare drum on top of that, and I might sometimes do that. But typically speaking, you know, these days I like to simplify my life and not do too many layers when it comes to things that could cause problems, like layer 2 different rock drum kits together. That I don't like to do because, you know, when it comes to samples or even not, it can cause some flamming and you know, inconsistencies and phasing issues, especially with the kicks, you know. So what I'd rather do is start with a good sound and then mix it right. You know, maybe throw it through parallel compressor or the right kind of reverb, or, you know, worst case scenario, I can maybe add on another sound on top of the snare that's triggered exactly with the same MIDI note that blends well, and I have to test that to make sure it sounds tight. But typically I like to use the right sounds in the right mix. And then if there's going to be augmentation, which there was a lot in Killer Instinct as far as percussion goes, because remember, it wasn't just rock drum kits all the time. A lot of times there was some extra beef thrown in there that was, you know, some epic stuff. Wasn't just one drummer. So, okay. Question number 1.
Hey, thanks. And the second is, I know you work on 450 projects at the same time. So
this week only
question
436. Go ahead. Yes.
My question is, do you use some sort of project management software or Black Magic, or like, what's your secret?
Good question. Really good question. Yeah, I'm not endorsing anything, but I do use Trello. Trello is my project manager of choice right now. I mean, you can do a lot with it without spending money. And if I were to, you know, when I'm very picky and choosy of what services I spend my money on, but that's one I'm glad to spend money on. Trello is really very, very, very good. But you can go quite far with it for free, and it's pretty easy and intuitive. So I do happen to use Trello. I'm sure some people will have some other suggestions out there, but out of everything that I've tried, I like to have something that's powerful, but also simple and intuitive. And it allows me to have my own boards just for me, like to manage my week and my current projects. And then it also allows me to create boards separately for teams of different projects that I might be working on. So, you know, if I'm working on an album with an artist or different people, or I'm working on a trailer music library with a team of people, or I'm working on a TV show, or I'm working on, like, whatever it is that they often have, or I'm writing a musical, you know, I have different boards based in with teams, and I can communicate in there rather than using emails and texts and Facebook Messenger and all that nonsense. It's just too much. I just can't handle it anymore. It's just too much information overload. So anything I can do to simplify my life, the better. Those are very good questions. 2 for 2, Manuel.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Good
Amazing
going.
answers.
Good going. So, yeah, so let's see. Who do we have? And remember, put your hand down virtually. All right, so next up, I think we have James, right?
Hello.
Hey,
Can you hear me
James.
okay?
I can hear you great, man.
Awesome. Great to be here. So I'm going to preface this question with a situation I was just in last night.
Ooh, we like situations.
I'm based out of Seattle,
Okay.
and I meet up with a group called the Seattle Game Audio Group, and I'm fortunate to be in a city that's got a very robust gaming community, and a lot of people in this group we're talking audio directors from AAA, companies, to like someone who just does it in their garage who's a hobbyist.
Right.
And it was a virtual meetup in Discord, and in this group was a lead programmer from Epic Games, audio programmer, as well as some audio programmers on his team. And I'm a sound designer, also a composer, doing a lot of sound design lately. And one of the people in the group was like, well, what we find at Epic Games is like composers don't like to work with other composers. It's all because of their ego. I have very strong opinions about this. And like people who are composers in the group, I can see their eyes light up a little bit. And Will Roger, who I've become kind of acquaintances with, answered this question in a very nuanced and blunt way. And his response was amazing.
Okay.
And of course, when I'm talking to someone who's working at a game company that I might want to work with, I want to be mindful of how I talk with them, because people can respond in different ways, especially when they have strong feelings. And I also, he made the comparison of, oh, when animators work as a team, there's a supervising animator, you know, an animator lead, and their team all works together. Why can't you composers do that? And I was like, well, it also comes back to a salaried employee versus you being contracted. When you're contracted, you're your own independent business. You might already have a team that you go to, and you might have built trust with your team that you go to for like a guitar player or, you know, a drummer. And so it's like when they ask you to work with someone randomly, it's like, I haven't gained a relationship or trust with this person. What can I even work with them? So finally, leading up to my question is, how do you respond when a studio wants you to work with a composer that you never worked with before? Has that ever happened to you? And how open are you to working with other composers when they're like, we want you to work with this person, or you know, here's a team of how are you open to that, and how do you respond to that in a tactful way where you're not like pushing back too much, you know?
Yeah. Wow. That question. Well, first of all, you mentioned Will Roger, who's awesome. Tell me a little bit about what you said that he responded in a way, because I'm curious as to what the context was and what was he hearing? What was the question he was hearing when he responded? How did he answer the question? Because that might connect to what I'm going to say.
He responded in a way that was very blunt and awesome. He was like, with all due respect, and like, I mean, don't quote me on that. I feel he was like, with all due respect, he was like, you're inaccurate about a lot of things. And he was just like, you know, and he kind of led up to, he's like, you know, it's not that we're not, you know, willing to work with other people. He kind of like, he went into the relationship thing with like, I already have a relationship somewhere in this group that I go to for certain things, and I already have a team. So when someone asks me, work with this composer, it's not that I'm pushing back, and I'm kind of channeling Will here. It's like, I already have, you know, it's not that I'm not open to it. It's just that, you know, I already have my network set up, especially Will Roger. And then that's when I interjected and said, also comparing a salary when you're coming on as an animator already onto a team, it's a little bit different than being contracted out where you don't know if there's a team or not.
Right. Okay. So, oh boy. Okay. So let me see if I can answer this, because there's a lot of different varieties of what you just described. So let me just focus on two, and I'm going to take the extremes because it's always easy to see the extremes, right? All right. So one extreme is what you're saying, which is like, hey, Mr. Composer, we all work on teams. You know what? I want you to work with this person, and go ahead, go and start making great music together and start holding hands, and you never met, but you got a great score. And you don't even know anything about them. You don't know what they do. I don't even know how you guys are going to divide up your work, but just figure it out. That's one extreme. That sounds almost like closer to what they were saying, which is a little weird, and it does show that they don't know what they're talking about. The other extreme is, and there's been plenty of games where there have been multiple composers, but any experienced audio director understands when composers collaborate, it's not like an animator collaborating or artist collaborating. It's completely different. All right? And I can show you why it's completely different. But when a composer collaborates, there's going to be distinct roles. Now, for example, when I worked on Wolfenstein Youngblood, right? We had Martin, who was doing the other half of the score, and I was doing half of the score, right? He was working with Mick, where it was Mick doing one half and Martin was doing the other half. All right? I connected with Martin. I'm like, this is, you know, awesome. And I talked to the client to get an understanding of why and what Martin would be doing different from me. So we actually didn't like hold hands and wrote music together. We divided and conquered our roles. We specialized. We had a sound to us. Martin has a sound and a style. So they had him focusing on certain kinds of music. All right, let's say I might say more sound designy, ambient, cool building interesting stuff. If I had to generalize, I was doing more of the melodic, thematic stuff, right? Maybe, whatever. If I just had to throw a generalization out there. So I mean, when those roles are respected, I enjoy that, and I enjoy the process, and I'll reach out and be like, okay, cool. We're both pros. We both know. We both respect each other, what we're doing. I'm going to do this. You're going to do that. And sure, I'm going to actually send you some stuff so you can kind of see in case there's any way to cross over and borrow a motif. That's something that I wrote. You can do that's the way it should work. But you can't say, oh, what, the other extreme. And to Will's point, they don't know what they're talking about when they say that. That's like saying, okay, because in a game you have a person who's just, or a team or people just working on lighting. You have someone designing the rugs on the ground. You have someone designing the way the eyeballs move. You don't. They don't say, hey, you and you and you, you're going to work on the way the eyeballs move, and you've never met you before. Well, maybe they do. Maybe that's not the best comparison, but I don't even think that happens. Here's another comparison. Steven Spielberg, we want you to direct this movie, but we want you to work with this producer and this person and this person and this set director, and he's going to be like, goodbye, because some creative people, and it's much closer to composing, if I am working with the team, I don't want to be forced to work with a guitarist who I don't know and whose stuff that I might not be, I want to at least have a say in if, okay, yeah, this is going to support my vision. But a composer has a much more unified artistic approach, I guess you'd say. You can't just randomly slap people together in a professional setting and say, here, go compose the score and figure it out. That doesn't happen. I did probably a very horrible job of answering that, but it's such a weird question. I mean, I've never
it was a situation last night that just was like, whoa, and I was like, I'm gonna bring this question into the Zoom call. I don't want to go on too long, but I haven't worked with AAA, but I've done some indie. I haven't been doing this too long, for like 2 years, game audio stuff, been a musician my whole life, getting into sound design, and I have been fortunate that because I also do sound design, when I've gone on to teams and worked with my latest thing, the guy who was a project manager at this game jam was like, I want you to direct the audio team. I was like, okay. And I don't like to rule. I like to work with teams and be like, hey, what are you most excited about? What do you want to work on? And what are you most inspired with? And I can do sound design or music or only a specific type of music. And it worked out well. I like to play to people's strengths and what they're excited about.
Right.
And so that's how I work. And it's sometimes if I end up doing all the music, that's fine. If I end up doing all the sound design, that's fine. A little bit of both.
Right.
And I also someone in the group, I think one of the first questions was, I'm not going to try to pretend like I'm a veteran like you, but some of the best ways I have found to like get a first gig or network with people are game jams. If you just start doing, it's a great way to build a portfolio, network with people. And sometimes they come back and say, hey, you were amazing on this game jam. I actually have this opportunity that, or even if it's a passion anyway, that's more of an indie thing, but yeah, anyway.
Absolutely. Cool. A great way to meet people, like-minded people that are on the same path together. So that's really excellent. And just to wrap up your point again, which is another situation, I described two extremes, but there is another situation where you might have 3, 4, 5 composers on a game. But again, what happens with composers when a Sony has, 5 composers on God of War, they're not telling all of you to work on all the same material and figure it out. They're saying, hello, composer 1, we'd like you to create this. Composer 2, we want you to create this, because they know already what those composers are good at. And they want to get their specialized sound, right? When I worked on Lawbreakers, there was like 7 composers on it. But I had my own, like, Tom, you work on this faction and this faction. Mick Gordon's going to work on this one and this one. Jason Graves is on this one. Jack Wall is on this one. You know, now all those guys I happen to know, and I would love to work with them, quite frankly, but I didn't need to because they were like, we want, you know, and a lot of times they'll do that because they kind of want to have like the best of, like, you know, this composer's always good at percussion, and this composer's always good at synthy ambient mysterious stuff, and this you know, so they kind of go to multiple composers for what they specialize in sometimes. That's the professional way that I've seen on successful projects versus what you were describing and Will was responding to. Right?
Cool.
So anyway, all right, good questions. I like this stuff, man. It's really challenging me and making sure I don't put my foot in my mouth. All right, cool. So next up in the line, hopefully this. By the way, am I screwing up? Is there anyone who has been online and I've been skipping? Dom, thank you. Okay, and I also haven't asked Deborah yet, but Dom, you're up next. I don't know how that's happening, but and if that happens next time, by the way, just do this. Hello, because I can't, you know, I'm depending on the software here to tell me who's in the next.
Can you hear me well?
I can hear you great.
Okay. So first of all, thank you for doing this because I really appreciate it, and I think
sure.
that masterclass is really complete. I really like it.
Great.
So it's about a point that you mentioned during the masterclass is about reputation.
About what again? I'm sorry. It's a little muffled, I have to say. It's a little distant and muffled. I can hear you.
Okay. So let me try this.
Wherever the mic is, if you maybe
Can you
bring
hear
it
me
closer.
better?
Not yet.
It's better now?
Not yet. Same. Exactly the same.
Okay.
If that's it, that's fine. I'll just.
Okay. My question is about reputation. Yeah. So you mentioned during the masterclass, and I have this enigma for me that is about how I can get close to a reference track, especially if the game is close to other games. Like, for example, if somebody asks me to do the soundtrack of a game that is similar to Fortnite, for example, right? And I make they want the lobby track really similar to that. How I can deal with that? I'm mostly worried more than production team. I'm mostly worried about the fans of the game because the fans can attack and say, hey, you know, I'm part of the production. So
and it's going to happen. By the way, it's amazing. You know, you're gonna always draw comparisons. You're always gonna draw criticism. It's par for the course.
But how you can deal with the audio director and you know, and try to get distance from, you know.
Well, you know, look, it's a tough thing to navigate. So your challenge is, okay, if I'm given reference music, how do I, you know, if I'm giving reference music, I'm working on a game that's similar enough to the game they want me to reference, you know, the music from. So let's say we're doing a game that looks like Fortnite and they want it to sound like Fortnite. At what point do I cross the line into complete plagiarism and being criticized like, oh, God, they just ripped everything off? Again, it's a gray area, but here are a few tips. Music is comprised of several elements, key elements, which are going to tell you, you know, inform you what it is, right? So one of those are the notes themselves. One of those is the rhythm that the notes are played in, right? And then another thing is the sounds that are being used, perhaps the instruments that are being used, but more so the first two that I said. So if I were to say, okay, I'm going to come up with a song. Da-ba-dum, ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-bum. What is that?
I know it.
Do you know it?
Oh, yeah. It's Yesterday, Beatles.
Yesterday, by the Beatles. Now, if I were to do... By the way, I'm just making this up, you know, but here we go. I'm trying to make a point. So if I were to just go... Dum, 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 da da dum, with different chords behind it. I just did the same notes, but I changed the rhythm completely, right? So that's one way to keep in mind that that's a I don't want to say a trick, but that is one way you can kind of be inspired from something and get pretty darn close to it in the intervals, but change the way that the rhythm that they're performed in. Another way is to change the chords around. But you know, again, and another way to do it is the musical recipe. So here you go. I can speak from personal experience. Right. So I'm asked, hey Tom, could you make a new Halo score from scratch for a new Halo game? Ooh, but it's got to sound like Halo. Okay, so original music, original melodies, but it's got to be recognizable as Halo music, right? Now, this is a little different than your situation because you don't want it to sound like it's from Fortnite. But the same analysis of what I'm about to say will inform you on maybe what to do or what not to do. So if I want to sound like Halo, one, I'm going to use similar combinations of sounds. I'm going to use similar voicings of the chords, like certain iconic themes in Halo that Marty and Michael did, you know, which I love to death. There's a certain style to it. There's a certain shape of the chords and the way that the voice leading happens. There's certain combinations of sounds or musical styles, a little sacred music, some tribal music, some rock, some, you know, synthy stuff, whatever it is, however you want to kind of describe the recipe. So if you're going to if you use the same recipe, you're going to start getting closer to it. So you don't want to necessarily use the same recipe. Maybe you want to change the instruments altogether. Maybe you want to have a similar emotion to the music, but different musical recipe. Like, don't copy their formula exactly.
In the occasion that this happens because the audio director is really pushing in that direction, do you think that this can be anyways an issue with the reputation for a composer?
Yes.
Or it can be, right?
Yes. Yes. I mean, let's put it this way. I have been pushed to the point where I'm like, okay, I might need to have them sign a disclaimer here because I don't want to get sued. But, you know, yeah, I've been pushed in a situation. I remember I was pushed to do, I'm not going to name names or anything like that, but I was pushed to do something so damn close to a cue from a track, but it ended up being a trailer for a game, and someone on YouTube caught it and literally did a side-by-side comparison of the scene in the movie and the trailer. I'm like, oh, man. And there was no relation. They were completely from two different worlds. But I'm like, oh, God. You know, and I felt guilty. I'm like, I should have known better. I should have pushed back. And I should have said, you know what? You know, because, again, we are the composer. We're the expert in the room when it comes to music. But we have to balance the line between not acting like an egotistical narcissist, but also having a professional responsibility to say, okay, I'd love to, but I can foresee this being a problem. But here's the solution. And that's the difference. Coming up with a solution. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Good question.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. It's really important, this thing, because it's something that it's easy to deal,
That's right.
Especially the other side are actually when the other side are insecure.
Yep. That's right. That's right. Yeah, it's you have to navigate those situations. They become a little difficult. So anyway, really good question. I'm going to go next to Deborah because I haven't heard from Deborah yet, and I see a hand up with Benjamin. And that's it. So again, help me out if I skipped you because that's not my intention. So Deborah, you ready to ask your question?
Yeah. Hi, Tom.
Hey, Deborah.
I wanted to ask, in relations to Mark's earlier question, you mentioned something that caught my interest, which was that the the person or the people who have hired you, the developers or what have you, don't always know what is best in regards to the music that is going to go along.
Yeah.
So how do we as composers convince them? And have you ever had a case where you're like,
Yes.
stop it, I know better, could you like let me do my thing? Like, how is it that we handle
Yeah,
it?
yeah. In fact, that happened to me on a game that's coming out this year, and it had to do with the theme. So it's completely natural. I think the first thing to understand is that, again, we are on a team, and it's very easy for us as composers, if we get caught up in our egos in some way, to think, well, we're the expert in the room, right? So they should know. They should just listen to me. And if I don't think this is a good idea, then I just don't I'm going to shoot it down, right? You don't want to shoot their ideas down. Oh, Deborah, can you make a sound again so you can so your screen can come up? And by the way, if you are not up, please mute your microphones.
Sure.
Because Zoom
There you
will
go.
be Zoom will just, like, if you cough, then you'll come up on the screen. And so cool, perfect. So okay, so here's a good situation for you. Let's say you're asked to create a theme for this game, and you described the game, and you described the setting and the characters and the story and the time frame and whatever, and you're like, but we kind of like it to sound like this, or a little bit of this with this little splashed in. One thing I've I guess come a long way with, from when, from 30 years ago, is that I think I've matured in the idea that just because that wouldn't be what you would have done, or the first thing to come to your mind, don't shoot it down. Give it a shot. So I think it's our job as composers to give something a shot. We have to have some trust, and we have to risk failure. And what I mean by failure is you doing something that doesn't quite work, to come up with something new. So particularly when it comes with a theme, if you want to really be original, and you want this theme to be remembered for years and decades and associated with that project, you know what? There's got to be something unique about it. There's got to be something that might not have been done before. And when you've been doing something as long as I have, you sometimes naturally just assume, no, this is the way you do it. You always do it this way. So what I did in this situation is I didn't agree. I'm like, it doesn't seem to feel the way I would approach it. It's cool. I wouldn't have thought of that. So let me just try it. And maybe along the way, I'll find a way to kind of make it work, or come up with some kind of hybrid way. Like, ooh, had I not tried your idea, I wouldn't have come up with this cool, interesting mixture between my idea and your idea. But I'd say always give it a shot. Always give it a shot. What I did in this case was I gave it a shot. I did the whole theme. Actually, it was approved. They're like, this is it. This is great. We love it. And so I let it sit for about a month. I'm like, okay. I still didn't think it was right. I mean, I thought it was a cool piece of music. I just didn't think it was the piece of music for this game. So then what I did is about a month later, I worked on a new theme without even telling them. Okay? So I came up with this brand new theme, and I presented it. And I said, okay, I know you have this, and I know it's approved, and that's cool. But this is what I was thinking, and this is why. And so I kind of presented it, and as you can imagine, it was like, whoa, that's surprising. Well, thanks. I don't know. Can I sit on it for a while? And I'm like, yes, you can. And slowly but surely, a few weeks later, that audio director came back. I said, what? You know what? I do like this better. This fits the project better. But I allowed them to come to that conclusion by themselves, because we had the time. and we both respected each other. And because I didn't force it down, it didn't become like an ego-based thing.
Exactly.
So that would be my recommendation. That's an ideal scenario where you have something that completely doesn't work. You feel like, I don't know, but try it anyway. More times than not, you might find that their idea will yield some unique idea that you didn't think of.
That's good to know.
Right? Yeah, it's interesting. Good question, though, I have to say. Excellent question. All right, you got it. Great. Cool. Hand is up. I can hear you fine, Benjamin.
Okay, great. Having some problems with the camera, but
okay, no problem.
All you need is audio.
Yeah, that's fine.
So I have been working in film and television for last 20 years or so on the filmmaking side of things, and even though music is kind of the first creative endeavor that I ever embarked on 40 years ago,
right?
And I've been doing music as a hobby for 40 years. I've kind of, over the last year, been contemplating a career change in terms of doing music professionally.
Right.
And I know on your first live stream that you did, you had mentioned that you had a career, 10, 15 years prior to getting into game music. Yes. And, me kind of, I've done some things professionally here and there, little snippets and whatnot, and I'm networking and I'm taking every opportunity that I can. But what's the likelihood of somebody starting, kind of fresh with no professional music experience whatsoever, getting into game music? Like, it's kind of a two-part question, because there's that part of it, and then the other part of it, it's like I know film and TV scores like the back of my hand, but when it comes to game music, outside of like Medal of Honor, like Michael Giacchino did, and and some of these, some of the bigger games and stuff like that, like I look at your list of credits and I see some of them, but some of them I'm not, because I'm not a huge gamer, because that's the other part of it too. It's like I'm total film and television guy. I'm encyclopedia in that regard. Yeah. But when it comes to game music, I'm kind of like, so right. I'm trying to figure out, I'm so glad that you have this class, and even just the what I've watched so far, it's just huge help in terms of, that world. So I don't know. So how much of a gamer do you need to be to kind of get into game music? Because, obviously with film and television, if you're, scoring film and TV, having a knowledge and understanding of composers and things like that is, is kind of important. How important is it to be a gamer or something like that in terms of doing game music?
Great question. I have some good news for you. There's a little on both sides. So the good news is that, no, you don't have to have any, you don't have to be a big gamer, and you don't have to know an encyclopedia of all the games that are out to get into game scoring. You don't have to. Case in point, and this was said publicly, I'm not revealing any insider news and saying anything detrimental about anybody, but I remember at GDC one year that Sony was giving a talk on Uncharted, and they had hired Greg Edmondson as the composer, and Greg came from the film and TV world, and he never had done a game before, but they put him right in on a big AAA title, right? That was his rookie game, right? He I remember there was a funny story that came out of it, actually, when he first did the first scene, like they were trying out some of his music, and they gave him some game footage. So they have, in Uncharted, if you ever, maybe you haven't played it, but it's one of these games where it's like a third person, and, you see the back of the person. So let's say the scene, they gave him some gameplay footage. And, the character is like ducking behind the thing and then jumping out and running and firing and then going over here. And he scored it like as if it were going to happen that way every time. Yeah. Right? He scores like, whatever, in the music and whatever. And so it was like everyone is like chuckling like, oh, because if you know games, you're not scoring moment to moment the action, you're scoring the activity of playing that moment,
the experience
of it. But what was interesting is that even though he scored it that way, a lot of it was really cool. Because even if you play it back in a different gameplay scenario where it wasn't matching what he intended, it kind of works. You get these little happy accidents sometimes.
Yeah.
So one cool skill is, well, I digress. So anyway, we'll talk about that in another
right
place. But no, you don't need to be. Now, on the other hand, there are a lot of advantages to being a gamer. There are a lot of advantages to understanding how it works. And by you taking the Game Music Essentials course, even if you're not a gamer, you kind of learned already a lot of those things.
Right.
So that's really what's more important. The reason it's important to be informed about the world of game music and how it works in the context is it makes you more effective as a composer because you can come up with solutions. You can come up with music that you know is going to work, and you don't have to ask newbie questions like,
right.
you know, well, do I score the scene that way or do I? No, you understand the way it works, and you understand the options. You understand what a pre-trigger is.
Yeah.
You know what a tail is. You know what vertical scoring versus horizontal scoring is. Like those are things you've already learned. So I'd say, as long as you can do the kind of music that's needed,
okay,
you don't have to.
Yeah, because I've never considered myself to. I've always considered myself to be kind of like a Hans Zimmer type film scoring guy.
Sure.
You know, sure. I don't have. I mean, I could cheat my way through orchestrations and stuff like that. And I know some of the terminology and stuff like that.
Sure.
But I'm never going to be John Williams. And I know I'm never going to be John Williams.
Yeah, we already have a John Williams. We don't need another.
Yeah.
You know, I mean.
But you know, so I just wasn't sure. I mean, obviously, I'm sure it's a confidence level on the game company's part on hiring somebody who doesn't necessarily have an extensive, ground game in terms of, scoring games and whatnot. But like you said, that could also be an advantage too.
Sometimes,
and
because you come with it with some fresh approaches.
Well, and I have the advantage of, for the last 10 years or so, I've been working in motion graphics and 3D animation. So I'm familiar with the 3D world. I'm familiar with, game engines like, Unreal and stuff like that. And I have friends who do that. I'm teaming up with them, writing stuff for them with that. I have a friend who's doing some stuff for Epic Games, and I'm doing the music for those things in the hopes that Epic will, hear that stuff and say, oh, hey, who's this guy?
Correct. Well, that's how it works.
Stay I kind of figured, but there's a confidence level that is not quite there. Call it imposter syndrome, whatever you want to call it. But
I know, I get it. That's okay. Just keep hanging around, and sooner or later you'll be able to swim in the pool. You'll feel fine about it. But working alongside people that are already doing it, you'll be like, yeah, okay, I get it. I see all the things that make game music unique to the game music world. So you're good.
I kind of assumed that it would be pretty similar to film and television, so I wouldn't have, wouldn't be that different in that.
Right, and I mean, another big part of it is the delivery of the things, and that's probably going to be part of my next course is how to, okay, I get the music and stuff, but now, like, how do they expect it to be delivered? How does that work in the game world? So I think that's an important topic to talk about, which I will do. So we are over. Now, I don't want to cut people who have been patiently waiting, so I'm going to take 2 more questions, and then we're going to do this again next month. So who am I going to ask? Okay, we have, I think, Mark, you were waiting, if I'm not mistaken, before Tyler.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do both of your questions if you want to ask a question. But then I'm going to wrap up and we'll come back next month. Go ahead.
Yeah. You touched on this in the course. How much of a priority should it be for the composer to develop skills for Wwise and Fmod?
Right. Okay, good. Good question. How much of a priority is it for a composer to develop skills for Wwise or Fmod, meaning the middleware that is used to put the music in the game? It's very, very, very helpful. It ranges. It ranges from sometime not necessary to very helpful to absolutely imperative. That's the quick answer. So if you have the option, learn it, because it's only going to be a benefit to you. Sometimes it's not necessary. I find the bigger the game you're working on, the more likely it is that they handle all that by themselves.
Awesome. Yep. Perfect.
Okay? But I've been in situations where I had to deliver it, and because I am not an expert in Wise, I hired someone who is an expert in Wise, and then I paid that person to come in and do what they do. But it would have been better had I, if I could absorb information like Neo in the Matrix and go, click, I now know Wise. That would be great. So that's why I say if you're just starting out and you're young and you've got time to learn that. It can only help you.
If you can do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
And if you can't, there's people out there that can help you, but now you got to pay them. So, which, it's fine,
Thanks.
but, oftentimes there's not a lot of money to go around. So, anyway, good question there. All right, last question for today. Tyler, you're up.
Thank you. Also, this is perfect because I was also just about to ask about middleware. So this is perfect. So I guess one of the things that I'm currently working on, because James mentioned game jams. I'm doing a game jam this weekend, or trying to do a game jam this weekend.
Yep.
So when we're talking about middleware, obviously there's a plethora of engines, and Sony and some of these other bigger name publishers and studios have their own internal engines and all that kind of stuff. Like, is this a situation where, or would it be beneficial to kind of have a good breadth of knowledge across all these engines, or be more specialized? Like, I'm really good at Wise, or I'm really good at Fmod, or just kind of have a good baseline in as many as you can get your hands on reliably.
Well, similar to my answer the last time, it's good to know all of the main ones, because chances are if you have to do it yourself, then you can't tell them, well, you know what, I know you're using Fmod, but I'm good at Wise, so let's go with Wise. Or vice versa, right?
Right.
You usually can't make that decision because they already have the license, it's already integrated into their game. But if it's a situation where they're doing all the work, then no, it doesn't matter, because those pieces of middleware generally will do the same thing, and you're going to just provide music in a form that will be used in those engines. And if you're not programming it, then it doesn't really matter. There's no people at Audio Kinetic would kill me, but I'm just saying there's not a huge difference in the basics of those kind of programs, right? They both are meant to trigger music in a game, or sound effects, or both. Does that answer the question?
No, that helps a lot. Thank you very much.
Okay, cool. Excellent. All right, well, this has been awesome. Time goes so fast. Normally I don't go over an hour, but I couldn't say no. This is great. So we're going to do this again every month. So it's usually the second Wednesday, I think, of every month at the same time, 4:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, not Pacific Standard, Eastern Standard Time, New York time. So if you haven't already, please subscribe here on YouTube. And when you see that little bell there, hit that bell, because then you'll be notified when we actually go live. So after this event, we're going to post the link for another live event coming up, and please join us next time for this live Q&A session. I'm sorry I didn't get to any questions on YouTube, but we have plenty of other opportunities to do this. So I hope you all enjoyed it. Was this all good for everybody? Yes?
Yeah.
All good? Cool?
Always a good time.
Yeah,
Always
thank you
a
very
good
much.
time. Great.
Thank
All
you,
right,
Tom.
well, thank you again so much, and I look forward to seeing you all next time. All right.
Thank you.
Take
Thank
care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, take care, everybody.
Thank you.